Picture an emperor who rules almost an entire subcontinent, a man whose armies kill and deport hundreds of thousands in a single campaign. And then, that same emperor publicly admits he was wrong, carves his regrets into stone, and tries to run his empire on compassion. That isn't a legend from a fantasy novel. That's Ashoka of the Mauryan Empire, 3rd century BCE India. In this video, we'll see how the Mauryans built one of South Asia's first great empires, how Ashoka turned from ruthless conqueror to champion of Dhamma, and why his legacy still shapes modern India today. Let's rewind a bit. The Mauryan Empire rises in the late 4th century BCE, just after Alexander the Great's campaigns reached northwest India. Out of this world of competing kingdoms in the Ganges plain, one ruler stands out, Chandragupta Maurya. Around the 320s BCE, Chandragupta overthrows the Nanda dynasty in Magadha, in what is now Bihar in eastern India. From his capital at Pataliputra, near modern Patna, he builds a powerful empire that stretches across much of northern India. A Greek ambassador named Megasthenes, who visited Chandragupta's court, describes a huge fortified city with wooden walls, towers, and a complex administration. Even though his account survives only in fragments, it gives us a glimpse of a highly organized state. Chandragupta is followed by his son Bindusara, who continues to expand Mauryan control down into central and southern India. By the time Bindusara's son Ashoka enters the scene in the 3rd century BCE, the Mauryan Empire is already one of the largest political units South Asia has ever seen, stretching from Afghanistan in the northwest to Bengal in the east, and deep into the Deccan Plateau in the south. Ashoka is probably born in the late 4th century BCE. He's a grandson of Chandragupta, and, most likely, the son of Bindusara. Later, Buddhist texts describe him as a harsh, even violent prince before he became emperor. But we have to be careful here. Those stories were written centuries later and mix history with legend. What we know with much more confidence comes from Ashoka's own inscriptions, dozens of edicts carved on rocks, and beautifully polished stone pillars across the subcontinent, in local Prakrit languages and scripts like Brahmi and Kharasti. At some point in the mid-3rd century BCE, Ashoka becomes emperor. Exact dates vary among scholars, but a common estimate is that he ruled roughly from 268 to 232 BCE. In the early part of his reign, he acts like many powerful kings of his time. He continues to expand the empire. His most famous and most terrible campaign is against Kalinga, a region on the eastern coast, in what is now the Indian state of Odisha. Ashoka's own rock edict 13 tells us that the conquest of Kalinga was brutal. The inscription claims that about 100,000 people were killed, 150,000 deported, and many more died from related causes. These numbers come from Ashoka's own text. Even if we allow for exaggeration, it was clearly a massive human disaster. And here is where Ashoka becomes unique. Most ancient conquerors celebrated their victories. Ashoka does something different. He publicly expresses remorse. In that same Rock Edict 13, he says that after Kalinga, he felt deep regret for the suffering he caused, especially for the families torn apart and for religious practitioners uprooted from their homes. We can't climb into his mind, but we can read his words, carved in stone for everyone to see. That's extraordinarily rare in ancient history, an emperor admitting that he feels sorrow for his own violence. It's after this moment that Ashoka associates himself strongly with Buddhism. Now, he isn't inventing Buddhism. The Buddha lived centuries earlier, probably in the 5th century BCE. By Ashoka's time, Buddhist communities already existed across parts of northern India. But Ashoka becomes one of Buddhism's most important royal patrons. He refers to himself in his edicts as Devanampiya Piyadasi, beloved of the gods, of gracious appearance. And he begins to talk about ruling through dhamma, a word that in this context means a moral law or righteous conduct, not just a single religion. So what does this new policy actually look like in practice? Thanks to his edicts, we have a surprisingly detailed picture of Ashoka's ideals. Ashoka's Dhamma is not simply everyone must become Buddhist. In fact, he explicitly promotes respect for all religious traditions of his realm. In one edict, he warns against praising one's own sect while slandering others, saying that doing so harms one's own religion. So what does he emphasize? Things like respect for parents, teachers, and elders, kindness to servants and slaves, honesty and moderation, nonviolence and restraint, especially toward living beings, religious tolerance, and listening to others' beliefs. He creates a special group of officials called Dhamma Mahamatas, officers of Dhamma, whose job is to travel throughout the empire, looking after the welfare of people, including groups on the margins of society. Ashoka also tries to make practical changes. In his edicts, he says he has arranged medical care for people and animals and ordered the planting of trees, wells, and rest houses along roads for travelers. He restricts certain kinds of royal hunts and sacrifices, and he lists animals and birds that are to be protected or whose killing is limited. Importantly, he doesn't abolish punishment or the army. The state still uses force when it must, but he tries to soften justice, for example, by allowing time before the execution of certain criminals so they can appeal or make preparations. And he insists that the best kind of conquest is not by the sword, but by Dhamma, by persuading people through moral example. Ashoka's vision isn't limited to his own borders. In some of his inscriptions, he mentions sending envoys beyond the Mauryan frontiers to spread his message of Dhamma. He refers to contemporary Hellenistic rulers by name, kings like Antiochus, Ptolemy, Antigonos, Magus, and Alexander, Greek-speaking kings who ruled parts of Syria, Egypt, Macedonia, and North Africa. Historians debate how far Ashoka's ethical influence really reached, but these names in his edicts show that he was aware of and engaged with the wider Afro-Eurasian world that had formed after Alexander the Great. According to later Buddhist chronicles from Sri Lanka, Ashoka also supported missions to the island, led by a monk named Mahinda, who these texts describe as Ashoka's son. Those accounts were written centuries later, so historians treat their details cautiously, but archaeological evidence does show an early Buddhist presence in Sri Lanka that fits broadly with this period. Inside the empire, Ashoka's realm is divided into provinces with their own centers, places like Taxila in the northwest and Ujjain in the west, linked by an extensive road network. Texts traditionally connected to the Mauryan age, like the Arthashastra, describe a sophisticated system of taxation, administration, and royal oversight. While that text is more a manual than a straightforward record, it matches what we see: a highly organized imperial state. So what happens after Ashoka? The Mauryan Empire does not last very long after his death. Over the next decades, a series of successors rule smaller and smaller territories. By about 185 BCE, the last Mauryan ruler, Brihadratha, is overthrown by his general Pushyamitra Shunga, who establishes the Shunga dynasty in the Ganges Valley. For many centuries after that, Ashoka is not a major figure in most historical memories. His name survives mostly in Buddhist traditions, and even there, mixed with legend. Then, in the 19th century CE, British and Indian scholars begin to systematically study the mysterious rock and pillar inscriptions scattered across the subcontinent. In 1837, the scholar James Prinsep publishes a major step in the decipherment of the Brahmi script, allowing researchers to finally read these texts. They realize that the Devanampiya Piyadasi of the inscriptions is in fact Ashoka Maurya. From near obscurity, Ashoka suddenly emerges as one of the best documented rulers of the ancient world. Today, Ashoka is everywhere in modern India's public symbols. The famous lion capital from Sarnath, once topping an Ashokan pillar, is now the state emblem of India. The Ashoka Chakra, a wheel with 24 spokes that appears on some of his inscriptions, sits at the center of the Indian national flag. Why does he matter so much? Because Ashoka forces us to rethink what power can look like in the ancient world. He is a conqueror who writes that he regrets conquest, a ruler who tries, within the limits of his time, to run a huge empire on principles of compassion, religious tolerance, and moral self-control. He's still a king, with armies and prisons, but his own words, carved into stone over 2,000 years ago, show an attempt to turn personal remorse into public policy. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Ashoka and the Mauryan Empire, and you want more history told through the voices and sources of the past, make sure to subscribe to ChronoWis, hit the bell, and tell me in the comments which empire or ruler you want to see next. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the most powerful revolutions start not on the battlefield, but in a ruler's conscience.